Hello and welcome to How Do I BI, a many-part screencast series on SQL Server Analysis Services. I'm Lynn Langett, a developer evangelist with Microsoft, and my blog is blogs.msdn.com, SoCalDevGal. This series is a companion to my recently published book, Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server 2008. Today's topic is Tools for Working with SQL Server Analysis Services. We'll be examining the tools that are installed by default and taking a look at a couple of other tools that you can get from sources outside of Microsoft. The FAQs and gotchas around this topic are as follows. The first and probably most important is the primary development tool for creating OLAP cubes and data mining structures is called the Business Intelligence Development Studio. Although it's based on Visual Studio, it doesn't require Visual Studio. And as we'll see in the screencast, if Visual Studio is installed, it'll install as a series of templates. It doesn't, however, as I said, require a license for Visual Studio. And this is a common point of confusion among people who are using SSAS. You'll also see some other tools, including SQL Server Profiler, which now work with Analysis Services, and SQL Server Management Studio. It's important to understand that although these tools are graphical or GUI in the primary way that you work with them, the underlying metadata is in a script format, which is really convenient for reuse and replication. It's XMLA, and we'll take a look at that briefly as we get deeper into the screencast series. The last tip that I want to share before we go to the screencast is that many developers of SSAS solutions choose to download a tool from Codeplex, which is an open source repository that Microsoft runs called BIDS Helper, and we'll take a look at that as well. Before we go to the screencast, I want to highlight yet another community expert on business intelligence, and I include these experts so that you can have additional resources as you're learning. His name is Reza Madani, and he's an expert in SSIS, also hails from Southern California as our previous expert, and runs several user groups. We're taking a look at the tools that are used when you develop SQL Server Analysis Services solutions. We'll start by opening the Start menu and navigating to SQL Server 2008. Underneath, we'll see some of the tools that we're probably familiar with from working with relational databases such as SQL Server Management Studio. And we will indeed use this to do administration of our OLAP cubes and data mining models. So let's take a look at that right now. We've already connected by clicking Connect and Analysis Services, selecting our instance, server name, and authentication type. Once we do that, we see that we have two containers inside of our Analysis Services instance, databases and assemblies. For the purposes of this screencast, I've already installed the samples. By default, SQL Server Analysis Services does not include the samples. And as you drill in to each of the containers, you'll see that the containers hold information about the particular Analysis Services database, in this case AdventureWorks DW. For example, we have a data source. As you're familiar with from working with SQL Server Management Studio on relational databases, if you right-click, you have a shortcut to the most commonly used menu options. For example, you can script this data source as a create to a new query editor window. So if we were to do that, we'll click Create, and that's going to generate the XMLA that we talked about earlier in the screencast. And this is showing the underlying metadata that's associated to the particular connection for the sample. We're going to go on and look at some of the other tools. So again, we'll go back to All Programs, SQL Server 2008, and we'll look at the primary development tool, which is SQL Server Business Intelligence Development Studio. Because I have Visual Studio installed on this demonstration machine, the templates become part of my existing Visual Studio installation. To take a look at those, I'll click on New, then Project, and once the dialog box opens for new projects, I'll then click on Business Intelligence Projects, and you'll see that we have projects of type Analysis Services for cubes and data mining models, Integration Services, and SQL Server Reporting Services. So it's a one-stop shop in terms of development. As we continue this series, we'll be using the Business Intelligence Development Studio as well as SQL Server Management Studio extensively to understand how to create, administer, secure, and maintain cubes and data mining models. In addition to these two core tools, you'll probably also want to use SQL Server Profiler. Again, many of you that come from the relational world will be familiar with SQL Server Profiler, and that's listed under the Performance Tools on the Start menu. However, you'll be happy to learn that SQL Server Profiler can be used to trace activity on OLAP cubes and data mining models. So as with the other tools, you must first make the connection to the particular server. In this case, we're selecting Analysis Services. Select the instance and then the authentication. Again, in subsequent screencasts, we'll take a closer look at how to configure traces for performance considerations in Analysis Services. So we're going to go ahead and cancel out of this, and then we'll navigate to the web for one last tool that I use very frequently. This tool is part of Codeplex, which is www.codeplex.com, an open source community hosted by Microsoft, and it's called BIDS Helper. So this tool is not part of a standard SQL Server Analysis Services implementation, but it's been created by the community and adds, as you can see here as I scroll down, a number of useful pieces of functionality directly inside of Business Intelligence Development Studio. So I would highly recommend that you download this. It is free, and you add it to Business Intelligence Development Studio. It's a simple download. You just go over to the source code page and then pull down the appropriate files, and then these menu options will appear as part of a Business Intelligence Development Studio. So in the next screencast, we're going to take a look at getting the samples installed so that we have something to look at as we're learning how to create cubes and data mining models. Thank you.